Greetings, everyone. Right now you have joined the Housing Price Task Force. Today is May 22nd, 2023. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairwoman Harris.
Present.
Vice Chairman Espinal.
Present.
Councilwoman Graves.
Present.
Councilwoman Peterson.
Present.
Councilor Royce is absent. We have 4 present and 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I don't let the records show that we Councilwoman Sue Andrew is here with us tonight. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please read the first item into the record, please?
Presentation from the Secretary of Housing, Stefan Pryor, and Assistant Secretary Hannah Moore, Rhode Island Department of Housing.
We have been provided some exhibits. I will entertain a motion to enter this as exhibit 3C.
Make a motion.
Motion made by Councilman Graves, second by Councilman Espinal. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have asked tonight that we be joined by, make sure I get it right because I get names out, the Secretary of Housing, Stephanie Pryor. And we also have his assistant here today. She's going to also join with the table. Assistant Secretary Hannah Moore. Thank you, Hannah, and also Secretary for being here today. You can please join us at the table. We are here tonight to hear a presentation from you, from the state, and especially with where we are right now with the prices of shelters and the need for shelter and unsheltered people to be housed. And so it's so important for us as the Housing Price Task Force to learn as much as we possibly can about what is going on, in the housing atmosphere. So we know you play a major role from the state. So tonight we're asking for a presentation. If I don't know how many presentations is it, and if there's enough for the public, if the public haven't received. Just a few left, and if you guys can try and share, that would be really great.
Do they have to sign in to speak or they?
Mr. Pryor, could you please identify yourself and also your secretary for the record, please?
Absolutely. Stephen Pryor, I serve as the Secretary of Housing for the state. I'm a proud Providence resident.
Hannah Moore, Assistant Secretary for Housing and also a proud Providence resident.
All right. So tonight you have prepared for us, and I know it's not online, right? It is online. Beautiful, great. So you have prepared for us a presentation. So we will follow you within this presentation. I will open it up for the committee to have any questions for you. And then after, we'll follow into the public, maybe who also here tonight to greet you. We seem to have a nice group of public with us tonight. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
You're very welcome. You may proceed, sir.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. First of all, Madam Chair and members of this task force, we want to thank you for dedicating yourselves to the question of the challenges we face in our capital city and indeed in our state regarding housing and homelessness. We're grateful for your deep dive into these crucial issues. What I'm going to do, if I may, Madam Chair, is talk to you about the status of housing and homelessness using some data that have been recently compiled or presented in a new form. And then I'm going to talk to you about the work we are doing at the state level. I'll express even in advance of that we must conduct this work if we are to succeed together. It's so important that we collaborate among state, city, service agency, and other stakeholder participants to get this job done because the task is enormous. And our most vulnerable residents are especially counting on us. So let me go ahead and get into it if I may.
Yes, please.
So if you can turn to page 3, this is where we begin to look at the stats involved, and I'll wait to make sure that on the screen it goes there as well. So there we go. This may not be perfectly visible to everyone in the audience, so I'll try to say these things out loud. I'll try to voice it over. But there's been an analysis of the housing production rate across the 50 states, meaning the housing production per 1,000 residents. It's a ranking of the states, and it's done in a fair manner, a proportionate manner, in that it's done in accordance with the concentration of population. And it is the unfortunate reality that Rhode Island ranks dead last. We have the worst housing production rate in the United States of America. 50th out of 50, which is a problem for Rhode Islanders seeking housing in our capital city, in our cities plural, in our suburban and rural locations here in Rhode Island. It's a problem at every income level because the housing market is so tight that the kinds of units, whether for rent or for sale, that Rhode Islanders expect to attain at given price points, they're not available at those levels. And housing is more burdensome for Rhode Islanders than in memory. So it's a major problem that we have the worst housing production rate because in the absence of supply, the market is too tight and it's creating the problems that I just described. It's especially impacting our most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. It's especially making the situation challenging for Rhode Islanders who are at the lower income levels, Rhode Islanders who are unsheltered and seeking homes, for Rhode Islanders on the edge for whatever reason, for our seniors, for our veterans, for individuals escaping domestic violence and seeking new homes. These problems are especially pronounced. So we owe it to our state to redouble our efforts around housing production, and we must focus on our most vulnerable communities. On the next slide, this is page 4. Let's make sure it correlates on the screen. It does. Just want to share out that one of the common criteria for housing cost burden is whether the cost of housing exceeds 30% of income in a given household. That's 30% of net income on rent and utilities is that threshold. What this slide displays is that 150,000 households are cost burdened, paying more than that 30%. Well, you can see the concentration where greater than 35% is in the pinkish red and 25 to 35% is in the yellowish color. And you see that Providence is in the category with the greatest percentage burden, that greater than 35%. I'm sure for this task force, not surprising, but we wanted to put this unfortunate fact in context and express to you that the mandate that you've given yourselves and that you've given to the broader community to remedy these challenges, it's certainly merited. And we must do better by cost burdened Providence residents and Rhode Islanders. Next slide. And this is slide 5. One of the contributing factors that is contributing to our low housing production rate, and in particular, the lack of truly affordable housing in Rhode Island, one of the contributing factors is that we have been underinvesting as a state. Now, my commentary here isn't specifically on municipal government, but I think it's fair to say, this is separate from this slide, the state government, the city and town governments of our state have been insufficiently resourcing housing production and preservation. But I'll speak just to the state stats utilizing this slide. A dubious distinction once again, Rhode Island is second to last among New England states in per capita spending for housing. Second only to New Hampshire, and I'll reference New Hampshire several times. We are not in a good position if we're competing with New Hampshire because they do a yet more miserable job on housing. So, you know, we're not nearly trying to beat them because we ought to be trying to be the exemplar in the New England region. The New England state that does best by our residents regarding housing, and in particular, regarding our lower income and moderate income Rhode Islanders, we ought to be doing the best in terms of the production and preservation of units. We're second worst in the entire region. On homelessness, Madam Chair, I want to share some specific rankings to put in perspective our homelessness problem. We have the 17th highest per capita homeless count in the country as of the most recent point in time count, which was last year. There is a new point in time or PIT count coming out soon, so we'll see what's happening there. And that's on a per capita basis. So this is once again a way of looking at the proportionate share, if you will, of homelessness. And 17th is not where you want to be. And this is slide 6, by the way, so making sure it follows on the screen if I can request. So this is overall homelessness, sheltered or unsheltered, homeless, where an individual or a family does not have a permanent home. And now if you look at the next slide, the unsheltered homelessness, there may be emergency shelters that are in fact serving as interventions. That's very important. I'm going to talk more about that. We're 32nd highest, still not where we want to be, but at least shelter is playing a meaningful role in our ecosystem and helping our very most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. So we're 32nd highest per capita for unsheltered homelessness in the United States. It's very important that we continue to focus on emergency measures as we build towards permanent solutions, and I'll come to explain that as we go. So that's just some context, Madam Chair and members of this task force. I want to get into
before you do that, I just want to take a pulse check with the committee and see if there are any questions. I'll let the record show that our Councilman Royce is here. I want to check in with the committee. Are you all right? Or should we continue? Okay.
I say we continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Appreciate it. And feel free, of course, Madam Chair, interrupt as we go, as you just did. If there are other points where it's helpful. This is now page 8. So to make sure there we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about the State Housing Department as one of the coordinating entities for these efforts. There was a request in advance that we present on this, and we're very happy to explain who we are. This new secretary role and this new office, which is the Secretariat, is a coordinating hub for housing related issues in our state and for homelessness. We oversee the former Office of Housing and Community Development, OHCD, that some of you all may have worked with and may be familiar with. It's encompassed within the new housing department. And we have a small cadre of staff for the entire state, 17 people, that's 17, not 70. It's a tiny team, but we are aiming to coordinate within this area of work, and we are aiming to coordinate also across disciplines and departments. As you all know very well, the health and human services agencies of the state play a profound role, especially as we discuss issues of homelessness, behavioral health, substance use, and other issues that relate to and afflict individuals who are most vulnerable. So this is our department. We do oversee housing initiatives. We're working on the production of a plan that will be a statewide plan for housing. Also, for the first time in memory, there was a recent report that was put out by the Rhode Island Foundation in service of the startup of this new department and recognizing the depth of our challenges in this policy area. That was the report produced by BCG. It's a 182-page report, and Assistant Secretary Moore and I have been on the job for just a little over 3 months, and it's helped us in these 3 months start to articulate the severity of the problem and some of the potential solutions, the options and opportunities. So that exists, but we're working towards a proper plan, a more comprehensive plan. And as I mentioned, we coordinate across agencies. Page 9, pardon me, on page 9, I want to just share out a little bit of progress. In recent history, this represents a lot of progress in this scheme and scope of the problem. Still, we're just getting started. But just last week, I joined my fellow commissioners. I now chair the board of Rhode Island Housing and Mortgage Corporation. We all know it as Rhode Island Housing. That's a separate entity. Rhode Island Housing announced that we have approved financing for 1,400 units across our whole state, 1,200 of which can be categorized as affordable units. So financing that helps to fill out the capital stack and makes these projects financially viable. And if you take a look at the affordable unit breakdown, in just Providence alone, there are 604 units that were approved for these developments that you see listed on the page right here in Providence. So this is encouraging. The systems are starting to function in that there have been a series of resource allocations for housing with an emphasis on affordable housing in Rhode Island. There has been an historic allocation of federal funds in that the American Rescue Plan, with its $1.1 billion allocated to Rhode Island, saw $250 million of those dollars allocated to housing, with the great majority of that going for affordability in one way or another. And a great amount of that going to housing production and preservation. This is a big portion of that wrapped into other pre-existing and new programming for the purpose of housing production and preservation. So we're already seeing new developments get approved, or expansions of developments get approved, or preservation of units get approved to the tune of 1,400. There will be more rounds, not too many more. So the truth is that of the dollars devoted to housing development, there's only in the neighborhood of $30 to $32 million left for fiscal year 24 and going forward out of the state fiscal recovery fund dollars out of the American Rescue Plan. So out of that American Rescue Plan allocation of $250, there's a subcomponent for development. There's really only $30-ish million left for allocation for these purposes. So I don't have the graph in this particular deck, but if I did, what I would show you is that, as I mentioned to you, Madam Chair, we have the second worst investment level on a proportionate basis in New England. And we've seen a spike because we did invest American Rescue Plan dollars, I think wisely, in housing stock. But we're going to see this dramatic decline starting next year when we're still allocated, but we're going to see a decline back down to the baseline that's much too low. And we need to establish a combination of one-time and sustainable sources of funding to produce housing stock that's sufficiently affordable for Rhode Islanders. A couple points about that. There have been some steps taken that led to these 1,400 units that I just described. I already talked about the American Rescue Plan components, but there's also dollars that have been allocated from a new conveyance tax increment that's generating maybe $3 million a year for the entire state. A good start, a regular revenue stream, not enough. Every so often, we all see on our ballots when we go to vote, a bond, general obligation bond for housing. That's a good thing, but it's also a sign of the frailty of our system, our so-called system of housing finance, that we occasionally fund bonds to enable housing production. It's an ingredient, but it's not steady enough, and it's not, in terms of dollar amount, enough in that sense either. So there are ways in which we are investing in housing, but they must be enhanced. All this to get to slide number 10. Don't wait for it to go up there. Okay, right now, before the General Assembly, we have new tools that are proposed to advance our housing production and preservation work. First bullet speaks to new state LIHTC. Let me explain what that is. In most northeastern states, even beyond New England, 6 out of 8 northeastern states have a state low-income housing tax credit. A state low-income housing tax credit is necessary because what it does is it leverages federal funds that are available, but in order for a developer to utilize these illustratively 4% LIHTCs or LITACs, they need to fill out their project budget, or the federal tax credit is worthless to them. They may be able to obtain it, they probably cannot in Rhode Island, but hypothetically, they could obtain it. But they wouldn't be able to build their project. Why? Because the budget's not. So in order to leverage that tax credit and truly pull it down, spend the dollars on brick and mortar, we need to have the matching funds, or at least a partial match sufficient to fill out the project budget. 6 out of 8 northeastern states see that problem and remedy it with a state LIHTC, state low-income housing tax credit. You guessed the other state that doesn't in the Northeast, New Hampshire. Not a model state for these purposes. And New Hampshire and Rhode Island are the only 2 northeastern states that don't have a state LIHTC. Well, this legislative session, we have the opportunity to remedy that problem. We have put before the General Assembly a piece of legislation and a matching financial infrastructure so that we have a long-term mechanism for matching the federal workforce federal workforce tax credit, low-income housing tax credit. The legislation is drafted based upon regional and national best practices. There's a lot to learn from other states that already have a state LIHTC, and it would allocate $30 million a year for these purposes, which could yield 2, 3, 4 new developments or expanded developments every single year. Hundreds of units, a couple hundred units could result every single year from that new companion tax credit. So we very much hope that will pass. It's been received well by leadership and membership alike in the General Assembly. But we need to ensure that we all advocate for it. There are certainly no promises, and there's a lot more advocacy that would be welcome and needed. We've also included some other tools. Madam Chair and members of the task force, we've included some other tools that exist in a new allocation of that American Rescue Plan set of dollars that takes the scraps and the shards and the unspent pieces of the American Rescue Plan in Rhode Island of our total allocation and allocates them to housing. So on top of the $250 million, the governor is proposing already, I haven't expressed this yet today, but I'm going to say it now, $30 million for homelessness infrastructure, which means acquisition and rental of properties and the operation of programming for our brothers and sisters who are unsheltered. And that $30 million is on top of the $250. And then in a budget amendment just a couple of weeks ago, Governor McKee introduced this set of tools, and above and beyond the tax credit I described, there's $29 million for additional programming. And that's what this starts to get into when it says priority projects fund. There's a priority projects fund of $17 million to fill gaps in projects, more projects, especially those that serve vulnerable individuals and families. For example, permanent supported housing for folks experiencing homelessness. For example, very affordable housing, truly affordable housing. For example, housing for our seniors and veterans. For example, mixed income housing that may include the aforementioned units, so that we have healthy communities that include units for everyone seeking housing who cannot obtain it. These are a variety of the ways that the fund can be used. I'm moving on now to one of the bold categories here, and going to get into some of the subcategories. Tools for municipalities. One of the things that we've heard frequently is that larger cities, mid-sized cities, smaller towns in our state often need more capacity to carry out the work. There are devoted civil servants here in Providence who are getting the job done. But even so, there's a need for certain things to carry out housing development. One of the examples is that here in Providence, our capital city is blessed with transportation infrastructure, a variety of kinds. One of the busiest train stations in the Northeast, indeed, in the country. Bus stops that serve our residents well. Other infrastructure of note. Can we build more density of housing with an emphasis on affordable housing, inclusive of a mix of incomes, in our infrastructure-rich locations in the capital city in order to serve Providence residents and Rhode Islanders more generally? So there's a transportation-oriented development fund that would help cities and towns upzone and otherwise adapt zoning as the city or town sees fit. This is not a mandate. This is an incentive and investment to help a town, to help a city get there, and also for direct investments in the developments that may occur around a so-called TOD, Transportation-Oriented Development District. In addition, there's funding for infrastructure where key infrastructure may be needed as the missing link that will enable development to occur. The so-called last mile of infrastructure necessary to connect in to a new development and make it happen. Municipal fellows to build out capacity at the local level, staffing capacity to help a city or town carry out the work necessary to move development proposals forward. We know that capacity is an issue. Frankly, even in this age of relative abundance of federal funds, those very funds stretch the capacity of our municipal workforce because there's more work to do. There's more analysis work to do, there's more implementation work to do, and we're aware of that. We also propose, if you see the next bold line, proactive development entity. At the state level, we want to be positioned to do more. State government can't do it all. As a matter of fact, there are instances when we're not the best fit for solving the problem. Of necessity, and this is with justification, our procurement methods can be slow. Our personnel hiring rules can be slow. We are not known for our nimbleness in state government proper, but quasi-governmental entities can often move faster, can get closer to the private market, to nonprofits, partner and get things done. We, together with Rhode Island Housing, propose the creation of a subsidiary of Rhode Island Housing that would be a new proactive development entity that would get involved with identifying properties that may be underutilized and would be great places for housing. Identifying multiple properties that are adjacent and should be assembled into a larger tract to enable housing. Beyond acquisition and assembly of property, filling out that capital stack, helping to build out that project budget, working with developers, nonprofit, for-profit, anyone aiming to get the job done for residents of our capital city, for Rhode Islanders, helping them get those projects complete. By the way, these federal funds that I'm describing have a deadline on them. The velocity of our work matters. We've got to keep up with the timelines that are required by the feds. So we need to help our developers keep up with those timelines. So we propose a new proactive development subsidiary of Rhode Island Housing to get that job done. On homelessness, I referenced this quickly as I was describing the programs we're working on. There's $30 million in the governor's proposed budget for homelessness infrastructure. It's so important that now that we are past the ramping down of the Cranston Street Armory, now that we have ramped up new shelters and centers in service of Rhode Islanders experiencing homelessness, not just in Providence, by no means, indeed across our state. Now that we've done our best to mitigate the loss of beds with the ramping down of the Armory, we must not stop there. We certainly cannot rest on our laurels. We need to push forward because there are hundreds of Rhode Islanders who are still unsheltered. Even with the mitigation of the loss of those beds, the standing up of some new shelters and centers, we have hundreds of fellow Rhode Islanders who are still without shelter. We must work to do better. We especially must work to improve the situation before the winter comes again. And it will come again. So we need your help. Members of the City Council, we see your devotion to the issue because of your participation on this task force and much more. We need your partnership to identify new ways in this continuing emergency to serve Rhode Islanders who remain unsheltered, including Providence residents who remain unsheltered. A substantial percentage of the calls in to the coordinated entry system in Rhode Island are from our capital city. We know that there are individuals who are from Providence, have their main affiliations in Providence, who are seeking shelter. So we need your help. These $30 million will assist us. In addition, we have a new fund in the governor's amended budget. It's a little under $1 million. There's more we should do to build upon this, but the idea is to help host communities that do stand up new shelters and centers, help them underwrite the costs associated with sanitation, with ambulance calls, with security and policing, any of the costs that might be associated with a new population center with vulnerable Rhode Islanders living in a given place. We'd like to help to offset some of those costs and share some of the responsibility with host communities, Providence included, if there were to be expansions here in host neighborhoods. Addressing homelessness, more information on page 11. We also need to prevent the problem. It's essential that we aim to help Providence residents and all Rhode Islanders who are at risk of homelessness, who are experiencing housing insecurity. It's important that we intervene when we can. One of the ways to do that is to prevent eviction. And one of the things that we've done out of the housing department is in one of our earliest actions in this new leadership, under this new leadership team, is we've committed more than $3 million to the expansion of legal services to help individuals at risk of homelessness receive the legal representation they deserve and they need in order to prevent, within the limits of the law and before the court, the eviction that might otherwise be coming. So we work with Rhode Island Legal Services and their partners to expand their services. We aim to see over the next year or so how this goes. And it may be a justification for all of us, municipal and state officials, to invest yet further. Because if it's successful in keeping fellow Providence residents and fellow Rhode Islanders under their own roofs, it might be worth the further investment. We also need to collaborate with our healthcare systems. As you know extraordinarily well, the headquarters of these systems, at least a couple of the big ones and beyond, are right here in Providence. And some of the major hospitals and other emergency care and routine care systems are housed here in Providence. We do have challenges, and we experienced this in operating the Armory. When I say in operating, with big thanks to Amos House for their everyday role and to the National Guard. But what we witnessed there was that hospitals do dismiss their patients sometimes without destination, without a home to go to, without a transition plan. Now, maybe in some instances that those hospitals are under-resourced. I'm simply identifying the problem. I'm not expressing all of the root causes of it. But what I'm saying is that these things are happening. And if we were to be preventive and work with hospital systems when our most vulnerable patients are still in their hospital beds, we would be better. There's work to be done there. This is not just a housing department problem, obviously. This is not our specialty, in fact. These are health and human services problems, these are municipal problems, these are our collective problem, but we're identifying them and saying we must work on these problems. It's also the case that substance use is a profound problem for us all. It intersects with housing, and it intersects with most other challenges that we face as a capital city, as a state. We must do better, especially in the unfortunate opioid era we all live in, where these problems are so pronounced and they exacerbate our other problems. So these two are health and human services problems, municipal problems, as well as housing problems, of course. And we hope to tackle these issues together. Let me see if, yeah, we're going to talk about, so emergency shelter updates. I talked a little bit about it as I described the overall effort, but we do need to continue to consider this to be an emergency for our unsheltered brothers and sisters, and we must continue to build out a system that's adequate to the task, combined with prevention, and we ask for your help in finding those places that are best suited and to institute those measures that can help to make it the best possible set of conditions. So I think we've really hit those points, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. I did refer to this report. This is the cover page. Just to say it again, I commend to you this 182-page report that the Rhode Island Foundation produced utilizing BCG on all of these problems. They do yet deeper analysis on the points that I'm raising, and that is on Route 2 that helps to lay the groundwork for, but by no means produces a state plan. And we do wish to undertake the work for a state plan that will help to identify short, medium, and long-term strategies to address these intertwining problems. And I'm going to ask Assistant Secretary Moore to talk a little bit more about our groundwork and our prospective work regarding this plan. And let's go to the next slide.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, committee, for having us tonight. We are so grateful for the BCG report that the Rhode Island Foundation and their partners put together, but we know this is a long game. We did not get here quickly, and we're not going, and even while we identify really rapid actions and investments that we can make now, we know we need a long-term plan. So we're very excited to be embarking on a statewide housing plan where we'll be working together with all the 39 cities and towns across the state on the needs that they're hearing in their communities and all the ways that we can work together to address housing and homelessness both moving forward. So we are excited, as the Secretary mentioned, to really focus on the short term. This is a really urgent challenge that we're facing, and we want to continue to treat it that way. But also, what are the things that we're going to have to do over the long haul to really make a dent in this challenge? And we'll be looking at everything from rental market, home ownership market, how we deal with healthy housing, how we deal with challenges that landlords and tenants face. We'll be hearing across the state about a variety of housing needs, and we're excited to partner and really flag this as an opportunity. This is just at the very beginning, and we'll be happy to share updates as we move forward, but want to flag this as an opportunity moving forward. So Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and it was just filled with wealth of knowledge. First of all, I want to commend you for the work you're doing. Some reason or the other was struggling with the fact that we had already worked on a comprehensive housing plan for the state. Yes or no? In the past.
In the past, definitely, there have been plans of different varieties, but a comprehensive plan that looks at it all in one place it's been fewer. There have been individual plans around homelessness, around certain parts of the housing problem. There was an attempt at a broader plan in 2010, so that's certainly dated.
So that information, you do have something you're piggybacking for.
Yes.
They're not starting over this.
By no means, no, we
Yeah,
have
because that.
variety of documents we're drawing from, and that BCG report too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. And I want to open it up to the committee because I do have a few questions. I know Councilwoman Peterson have to go to another affair, so I'm going to start with you, Councilwoman.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming today. You know, I think we've all had collective conversations at one point or another about how important this is and how dire it is, and some neighborhoods more than others, but one of the things that Councilor Royce and I did at one point was we went out actually to an encampment that's over in his ward, and I think one of the things that was most alarming to me outside of the encampment and the situation at hand right now was you had talked about hospitals not having some sort of a plan, a follow-through plan for people once they are discharged. Reentry was also another situation where we found that people that were reentering didn't have a place to go. And this was something that was alarming, in addition to the fact that knowing that there were actually services that were being provided to the people of these encampments, whether it was food, water, very basic human needs. It was something that both Councilor Royce and I think we both kind of left like, what can we do right now? And the quick impactful things that we could be doing aren't quick enough. And so to that end, one of the questions that I have is what exactly are you doing to help in these very basic human need day-to-day situations?
Yeah, I'll answer in terms of what the housing department is on a preliminary basis doing, and then I'll quite frankly frame it as what we can do together.
Sure.
What we as a small fledgling department are doing is aiming to open new shelter and center locations, seasonal center, across the state. To be sure in Providence, but also in other locations where folks who are experiencing homelessness may have affiliations, or where there just may be real estate that we can utilize. So in the last few weeks, we've opened new shelters or centers in Warwick, in North Smithfield, in Providence, in Woonsocket, just in the last few weeks. And we need to continue that process. One of the areas where we can use your help, I promised I would interlace with some of these points, is you're helping us identify, you know your wards best, you know your neighborhoods best, by far. Where might there be a property where if there were a high quality, responsible provider that was capable of working closely with vulnerable residents, wrapping them with services, and connecting them with other service providers, where might be some good locations for additional shelters? Now, our money is not limited, but is not limitless. But we're hoping that we will see some of the new dollars that I described, that $30 million fund, for example, to acquire some properties that we can operate in conjunction with providers over the longer term, et cetera. But that's something that we've done, and we must do more. But I think we should all take pride in the fact that we didn't simply allow for the armory to come down. acknowledging that there were Providence residents who were utilizing the armory and there were residents from across the state. We opened new shelters and centers to mitigate the loss of beds. We need to continue to think about it that way. We shouldn't let the baseline of shelter in our state drop as we build towards the next winter, when I think there's even greater recognition. It should be year-round recognition, but there's even greater recognition that it's unacceptable for our fellow Rhode Islanders to be living outdoors or otherwise in shelter. So your help around where else we might go would be enormously appreciated. In addition, I think prevention is so incredibly important, and we need to find new dollars for addiction prevention in particular, and also problem solving, which is to say tailored solutions for individual families and folks on the street who might have nowhere else to go. Meaning, how can we help problem solve a bill that needs to be paid? Problem solve a medical situation that's complex and needs to be remedied and is impacting life in general. It helped to problem solve life circumstances through an intermediary like a professional service provider. So these are ways that we're making investments. We should also continue to invest in the private market solutions, meaning rapid rehousing, vouchers of various forms that help folks get into housing stock that's already built, that is not a congregate shelter scenario, but a proper apartment or another form of housing. We need more resources for that. The housing department is devoting resources to that, but we need more. And let me point out one more thing that's in the governor's budget amendment, and I think is profoundly important. We should be proud that in Rhode Island, our General Assembly passed and our governor signed into law the source of income legislation, which is to say, in Rhode Island, it is prohibited as a matter of law for a landlord to discriminate against a tenant based upon source of income. A public source of income, including a voucher, is not a reason to decline a resident from living in a place. As a matter of law in Rhode Island, we should be proud of that. We're a welcoming state. We pride ourselves on the spirit that enables all Rhode Islanders to live freely and to find opportunity here. We prohibit discrimination on the basis of the source of one's income. Having said that, we don't know whether it's working in practice. We don't know sufficiently in any case. So we put a couple $100,000 in the governor's budget amendment to get out there and take a close look, to analyze whether it's working, whether landlords are paying attention, whether intentionally or unintentionally, whether they know, and whether there are some programmatic steps we can take to make sure that this is enforced. So I've given you a few of the ways. I want to end with this. The ultimate solution is permanent housing. We must. You've talked about encampments. So permanent housing will not, in anything approximating the near term, help folks who are living in an encampment right now. But I do have to express this. The solution, in substantial part, to all of these problems is permanent housing, especially permanent supportive housing. Now, folks who are most vulnerable in Rhode Island certainly need other services, substance use, behavioral health, much more. It's interrelated. It's not the total solution, but it is a substantial part of the long-term solution. So we've all got to find ways to invest more in housing. And if we have sites that we know would work, if we have developers we know are willing, let's work together to bring them forward. And during this legislative session, these are the critical weeks. We need to pass these additional dollars, including that low-income housing tax credit. We also need to look to future legislative sessions. It's not enough. This is not a one and done situation. It's not enough even to do very well in this legislative session. We need to sustain that.
May I ask a follow-up question? Yeah, a different question. As you discussed some of the measures that you're doing to enhance housing investment, one thing that I happened to see was perhaps in your guidelines or regulations, was a rule or regulation with regards to the ability to seize any property listed for any reason without public hearing or constitutional protections. And I just wanted to follow up and ask, what exactly is it that you're looking to do with that very, very important and key authorization or opportunity? Because it seems to me like that would be, I know myself, I would be a little bit worried if you decided to say, hey, by the way, I want your house. Where do I go?
The short answer is nothing new.
Mhm.
And first of all, you're reading somebody's summary when it says without public meeting, without public procedure, because someone's summary is expressing that, not the actual law. So
But
just,
the actual law doesn't state anything with regards to constitutional protection of public hearing.
it does actually.
Oh,
So just because this is a source of confusion in my view, it's very unfortunate. But in creating the new Department of Housing, our attorneys were told, spell out the different functions and authorities that you would want to have in a housing department, especially those that are already existing in the state, not new. So it listed out acquisition of property through purchase, assembling property, negotiating, grant making, grant administration, and it listed out taking or eminent domain.
Right.
That is a power already inherent in the state, and all the drafters did was list the existing statute, not something new, where in order to pursue eminent domain, no one state official can take property. You have to go before something called the State Properties Committee in an open public meeting, and series of meetings actually. And the Properties Committee requires an appraisal, requires the reason why this property is necessary for whatever the public purpose is. Exactly the same thing that Department of Environmental Management needs to do, or Department of Transportation needs to do, DEM, RIDOC. That's all that was intended there.
Great.
By the way, this is not an effort to take people's houses. This is an effort, for example, this is a Pawtucket example, but in Pawtucket, there's Memorial Hospital,
Mhm.
which is a property that has now for years been lying unutilized, in some cases for sections of the complex deteriorating. But there have been proposals from out in the world, from public officials, from experts, that this could be a good site for housing. That we could take this dilapidated property that could get worse over time, and we could use it for housing. However, recently it's come to light through good work by members of the media, including the Boston Globe, that the ownership is confusing. The ownership structure is confusing. It's not clear who holds title, what the different management structures are, and there's controversy around those who claim to be the lead owners or the point people for the managers. So that might be a scenario where if that cloud of ownership cannot be figured out, and there's a beneficial use for Rhode Islanders, especially lower income and moderate income Rhode Islanders, it might be in our best interest as a state to at least as a last resort, have the ability to take it by eminent domain so it can be put to productive use. That's the kind of power that you might imagine the housing department should call upon. And that's all that was intended in the statute.
And have you identified any particular buildings or
No,
anything?
no, we have not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Before I move on to the next council person who may want to speak, I wanted to follow up on that question of encampment. Those encampments are very real in our neighborhood. 2 years ago, I had an encampment that sprang up out of nowhere in the neighborhood. First of all, it traumatized the neighbors that did not know it was happening. And the stuff that was happening in that encampment shouldn't have been happening to any human being that is living on this earth today. You know, I'm trying to say it shouldn't happen. It was horrible, the conditions. I took my 1 month in August to go into that encampment because I wanted to learn. I wanted to know what exactly, and that my month was supposed to run off of vacation. But I went outside and I started to really understand where the community was coming, the community of those people who were put in those encampments. What was, some of the things that were happening, to them that caused them to have to be on the ground like that and live in those really, really bad conditions that they were living in. one of the things that came out of that, we invited the governor without media or anything to come and talk to those people one-on-one, to ask them, not based on your data, not based on any of that stuff, directly, what it is that's gonna take them to change their lives and what it is they needed. You'd be surprised at the things that I've learned, and you mentioned the continuum of care. Last meeting that we had, and continuum of care came in and they gave us a presentation. It was very sad to hear that people are rating themselves by a number. It depends on the priority of how they get these houses. So the most saddest part for me, as a person, a human being, was to sit there and because I used to do organizing, so I do know you have to meet people where they are. So I had to put my emotions and everything else out of the way to be able to understand what it was that these people were calling for. It seemed like to me, it seemed apparently that the people are so disconnected from the system that has been created by the system, whatever it may be, right? And those are the things that are harmful, continue to be harmful, continue to help people slide into this type of trauma or self-medicating or whatever to try to escape some of these things. I mean, that whole month was an eye-opener, so much so that this committee means so much, not only to myself, but to my colleagues too, because in talking to the council, they understood that right now we need to do all we can possibly do to try to help move this initiative forward. I did not get from your conversation whether you supported encampments or not supporting encampments. Those are the things that's real for us as you close those shelters. Each and every one of our, especially in our low-income communities, will find these encampments. We'll find them in dangerous places. We'll find them on the highway, so they will spring back up. Because people are looking for that community, that place they can lay their head, that place they can call family like the rest of us. So I want to understand, what is your relationship with, and what a great question, Councilwoman, but I didn't get an answer. What is your relationship with encampment? But before you answer, I want to call on the public and let the public know you will have your chance of speaking. Right now, we're just working with the committee to try to figure out what it is the committee needs to make decisions in the future. So be patient with us. Yes, sir.
I'm glad you brought the question back up in that way, Madam Chair, because it's very helpful. Our view of what should happen relative to encampments and to Rhode Islanders who may not be in a cluster of fellow unsheltered folks, but are out on the street or otherwise without a roof. Our position is that we ought to provide alternatives. We need to work in a concerted way, in a focused way, in a well-resourced way to provide emergency solutions, including shelters and centers, en route to having permanent housing. Now, I have to say this, you understandably asked, here we are testifying before you, we ought to give you straightforward answers, tell you what we're doing. We've opened numerous now shelters and centers across the state, not just in Providence, but across our state. Warming centers, shelters, and other locations for folks experiencing homelessness. We've implemented prevention programs. I do need to turn it back to you and challenge you. What is the city of Providence going to do? In addition to intervening in encampments, in addition to outreaching to encampments, in addition to correctly and justifiably calling for more action, what is the city capital C willing to do in terms of devoting resources, identifying sites, helping to set up shelters, matching with providers? We all must ask ourselves, what are we willing to do? And let me tell you this, it's enormously challenging. Each scenario is complex. Any location has its own conditions and caveats that ought to be brought with the given new shelter or center. There are services that should be provided. There's programming that ought to be set up. But I need to bring us back to the we. What are you and what are we going to do together? We're a department of 17 people for the whole state. By the way, marvelous staff members, some of whom are especially adept at grant processing and budget keeping and liaisoning with the federal government, and a couple of whom are devoted to homelessness. So what are we going to do? I think is the key question, Madam Chair.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much because you're asking the right person. Someone who has a ward that's oversaturated with people who have provided more than enough service because of the zoning that's there and have brought all of that there. I think in my neighborhood, we've done our fair share. What we are looking for the state to do is look for that 10% and look for other communities that would share in the same thing that we shared in. I want to say, when I walk around my community, I've been in this position for 8 years, and when I walk around the community, I cannot be more proud of the people that I live with in that community because of what they go through and the things they see.
Yes.
Right now, we're pushing for public safety. We're looking for the safety of those people. Our community have came together just in South Providence and created an assessment of how these people's safety is being evaluated. Now, yes, we do have a responsibility as a city, but we also lean it on the state to make sure the state can go to all of these 50 municipalities and make some moves and serious moves around policies. We will be right there piggybacking with you, whatever you need us to do, and we will testify at the State House. We'll do whatever we need to do. We will move our community if that takes us to do that. So that's my answer to what the city and us as a council, especially Councilman Royce, who's sitting here saying, what do I do with this encampment? Because I don't want to violate anybody's humanity at all. And so we're here. But we need to, like you said, figure out just from the 3 months of your work, how are we connecting? I mean, we want to be able to pick up, we want our policy people to be able to pick up the phone call and ask you a question, and that question is, and vice versa. But as far as South Providence is concerned, I think we should have some kind of medal over there, and we should have some kind of extra funding in that neighborhood.
Yes.
And I have to say that you asked the right person.
Yes, and you heard my, if you find yourselves on Smith Hill, if you find yourselves in the state capitol, if you find yourselves in a legislative hearing at the General Assembly, we are asking for funding for host communities who are doing their part. So we think that,
Us over here.
honestly, we need your help passing it. And we do think that there are federal funds that are expiring that are devoted to the municipality, the city of Providence, for instance, that are currently devoted to our most vulnerable Providence residents, including folks who are experiencing homelessness. We need to make sure that we're renewing or we're replacing funds to make sure that the encampments don't grow as one manifestation of the problem. And most importantly, to make sure that more of our fellow Providence residents are not out on the street and suffering as a result. Madam Chair, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Very well articulated, very well evidence expression.
We appreciate that. We know that for years and years, the city or the state has not entertained this, and for years and years. So I understand why we're where we are, but we cannot keep making excuses. I believe right now it's on us. It's a burden on the state and the city. So we're here. We're definitely here. And I'm not talking for just the committee. I'm speaking on the behalf of the entire council.
Yes.
We've been governed by our president to make some very significant changes within the council around, housing and the housing. So we depend on you so much. I was talking to Councilwoman Gray.
Okay, my thing is, we're talking about the city of Providence. If you go to a lot of these places, most of those people are not from the city of Providence. They're from all these other areas around the city. I mean, all these other, they're coming from Woonsocket, they're coming from the little rural towns that probably don't have a space so that they come into the city. And thinking, I don't know what they think they're gonna get, because if we were doing that, well, we wouldn't have our own people out there, you know, but, so I think that a lot of us are working hard, you know, and there's a lot of organizations that are working hard within this city trying to do things. I can just, I'll toss out the Providence Community Health Center. They're the ones that have to do a lot of that. When you're talking about the wraparound thing, when the hospital puts them out, a lot of these health centers are coming in and trying to do whatever they can do to try to help people. Do they have houses for them? No. The other thing, I'm listening to all of these ideas, and all these ideas are old. You know, the vouchers. We know that we've been giving out vouchers. People have been holding those vouchers for years until they expire. And people are tired of hearing that, you know, I'm gonna get a voucher, but they know it's not they're not getting anywhere with it, you know? So because there's really no houses in Providence. I mean, we don't have the housing stock, you know. To be truthful with you, I don't even know if there's a lot within the state. But we need to look outside of just Providence and trying to help house everyone, you know. And I don't know how we're gonna do it. I really don't. But I'm glad that Councilwoman brought up the fact that we've had so many studies, you know, and we don't want to keep having studies, because that's the other thing. People are like, every time we turn around, there's a study, and they come back with these 100-page thing and this, that, and the other. We don't, you know, people are tired of hearing about the study. They want something done. So if we can lean from the ones that are already there, you know, the pearl that was in that one, and put it together and just go ahead and do something, because the people need help now. You know, they need help now. And unfortunately, like I said, the city of Providence, we don't really have any houses to give them. You know, we can talk a good show, but we don't have it, you know. So we have to figure out how we can fast through some of these other things that you were talking about. How can we get them? I know you said rapid. What is rapid? You know, and can we show something? You know, to uplift their spirits? Because sometimes, you know, the people will feel better and maybe not do as much as getting deeper in that hole if they think that there's something, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, they're disillusioned, and to be quite frank with you, I think most of us are getting disillusioned with this. And this really didn't make me feel any better when we find out that we're at the bottom of the floor. You know, the 50 states
designed to make us
you know,
feel good.
you know, so it's like, what can we do? So I think I agree with Councilwoman Harris. We are here, we're willing to work, we're willing to help, but you know, but we're at our wits' end also. And I also want to go back to that eminent domain thing. We've heard that before. Coming from a group of people where they use the eminent domain to take people's properties, and half of them are now parking lots now. All you got to do is go over to South Providence, to the hospital. You know how many homes were there? Yeah. You know, so, you know, we really don't want to hear that word. Every time you hear that word, fringe, because we know which community you're gonna go into and raise. So we really don't want that. So
Well, on your question of action versus talking, or truth forward steps versus planning. I hope we are starting to show what can be done in just 3 months, and let us prove together what can be done in 3 years. And indeed, we're remedying 30 years of neglect and underinvestment and inaction, right? So what can we do in the decades to come? But in these 3 months, we've stood up or otherwise expanded half a dozen shelters, extended numerous walking centers. And mind you, I know you've heard it, but I want to say it again. Warwick, North Smithfield, Woonsocket are the locations of these shelters that we've opened and expanded. We're working on Burrville. You may or may not have heard about Burrville. We're working on for family purposes on the Zamorano campus. We are conscious that this is a statewide problem. It also does have its roots in Providence. That is to say, there are individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness who were born and raised in Providence, have lived here for a long time, have affiliations here. And you should know that over a third of the calls to the coordinated entry system are from Providence, meaning folks who are here are making calls that they have no shelter and they need a new alternative. So it's not a trivial part, it's the largest plurality. The largest chunk of the calls into the CPS system are from Providence. We do need solutions that are in Providence. And as we're proving is possible through our work across the whole state in tandem with and in collaboration with city and town halls, we must open shelters elsewhere, and we are. Beyond that, we need to produce permanent housing. And in the, just in these 3 months, we've gotten to the point of approving 1,400 units. Now we got to get them all the way built. And we need to keep our eye on each developer and each development project to ensure that it makes it all the way through the groundbreaking and then all the way through the ribbon cut, so that Rhode Islanders are benefited. But 604 of those units are in Providence. That's something we've gotten done in these past 3 months with a lot of help and a lot of groundwork that precedes it and a big team. But my point is, the spirit of this room is the right spirit. We all need to be people of action. And we need to get a lot more done. And there is a role for City Hall in this. It is important. And I know that there are outstanding leaders, including right here in this room, who are devoted to the issue of housing. We need to make sure that we're devoting resources, both state and municipal, devoting energy and professional attention, both state and municipal.
Councilman Graves and then Councilman Escobar.
No, yeah, I have. Oh, shit. I forgot my train of thought.
Oh, well, we'll go back and forth anyway. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. That's here. Thank you. This is why I switch chair here to be able to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So let me just build on to what Councilor Grace was saying, and that's the going back just a little bit on the eminent domain. With that new set of powers, well, it's not new, we know about eminent domain, but within that, are you also empowered to bypass local zoning laws and permitting in order to expedite?
No. No, the law requires that, with few exceptions, that a local use permit be obtained, even when the state controls the property. So, by the way, in the case, let's say the case of Memorial Hospital, right? Maybe there's a friendly transfer of the property. Eminent domain should only be the last resort, used very rarely, only when you have a complex scenario like that, in my opinion. And please hold me to it. That's the way we should conduct this work. When there's a stubborn situation where the effects of the property being unremediated, undeveloped affect of the host community's residents, and indeed, in some cases, the whole state. That's when we should start to look at such a scenario, and we should utilize it as a last resort. But in the case of Memorial Hospital, there might well be a friendly transfer or something to that effect. But if there weren't, even if the state were to hold title, the use permit would have to be sought in Kentucky. And the building permit, meaning the inspection process, would have to occur. And all of the rules would have to be followed in undertaking that work. So rest assured, as to eminent domain, which is one of our delineated powers, the one that I hope to and would use the least, The goal is not to take homes. It would be in very, very rare circumstances to solve a complex problem and create homes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Vice Chair.
You're right.
Continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is good to know, because as you explained earlier during the presentation, it is a collaborative effort.
Yes.
It's gonna take humongous effort from everyone that is at the table. So especially elected representatives of our community, we do want to be at the table. We do want to be part of the decision making. Don't want to come across a scenario where if I, in my community, find out that there was already a permit in a or zoning change or permit acquired to have a homeless shelter in my community without me being part of that and the community being part of that. Because it is going to take collaborative effort.
Councilman, this could be a sidebar if you prefer. Thank you for this.
No, I'm just saying in general, because everyone, and I think we have run across.
What
the
is the
same-
permit issue that was before you were aware, sir?
What's that?
You can do this as a sidebar, by the way.
No,
Whatever you prefer.
I'm not referring to my specific issue.
Fine.
I'm referring in general because I do feel that you're gonna come
Yeah.
across the same scenario
Yeah.
in any community that you go to.
Yeah.
Because every community out there is represented by someone.
Yeah.
So just in general, I would think that this will be an ongoing conversation that would be and hope to net good results, but because of a collaborative effort.
Absolutely. And
So,
and you've embodied that, Council. I want to point out, and
so,
so many council members have. I just want to express, to my knowledge, in Providence or anywhere, we have not undertaken a project where the permit was sought without local officials being aware. So if there's a scenario I should know about, maybe it precedes me, I need to know about it, but no permit was issued. No project was finalized in anyone's ward, in any city or town that I'm aware of, that was prior to consultation. Now, there are situations where a property is a possibility, and that's when the conversation begins, and that's how it should happen. That's certainly true. So, Councilman, thank you for raising it, and let's continue to work on these processes together.
And then again, collaboration is key, and let's not forget, this is the population that deserves respect, deserves the helps, but also let's give the people and the residents that live there the same respect and consideration that they deserve. Let's not forget about the taxpayers. Let's not forget about the community, the impact that this has. And let's measure that, because you don't want to create an even worse problem. So we'll take that into consideration, and this is why this communication is so critical, and I believe that everyone here wants to play a role and have to, so that we can all have positive outcome in this. Now, in regards to the number of units being built, it's about 1,400.
In the most recent batch. And
Now,
the
is
approval
that-
at the round house.
Is that new housing, new apartments, or is that remodel of units that are already out?
It's a combination of production and preservation. And 1,200 of those 1,400 are affordable. Meaning that
But
they're for low
what's the
and.
number of new production? What's the number of new apartments out there?
We can get that number for you. We can get that number for you.
It's 1,400 is a wonderful number.
Yes,
I mean, this would with that.
yes.
But if we just remodeling apartments where people already live, we're not.
It's a combination of the two. And I will note that preservation is so important because if we lose our affordable units, then we're still backpedaling. But your point is well taken, Councilman, and we're gonna get you next.
And also the $30 million that we spoke about earlier from the ARPA funding. Is that 60 million that we're looking at, 30 from the ARPA funding and 30 on the budget for this year with the state? Or is it the same amount of money that we're talking?
Coincidentally, there's several different 30s. There's 3 30s. There's
Sorry.
$30 million for the low-income housing tax credit that would annually be allocated to housing developments that are producing affordable units in Rhode Island. So that low-income housing.
For how long? What's it,
We stated, I think it was in 4 or 5 years. 5 years.
at $30 million per year?
Yes, that's what we expressed in our proposal, so that the program can be assessed, but it's long-term, and the hope is that, quite frankly, it gets renewed. So we're comparable with our fellow northeastern states, and more importantly, so we're serving Rhode Islanders in need of housing. There's $30 million also for homelessness infrastructure, which is to help build out shelters and centers to serve vulnerable Rhode Islanders. And then there's $29 million for a variety of tools, especially to help cities and towns and to help make priority projects happen. 3 different pots.
So
On top of the 200
around 90 million total.
new in a gift that would be authorized in 2024, quite frankly. And then it would, that low-income housing tax credit would go on to future years for those 4 or 5.
And that's aside from the separate put of money set aside to build the or remodel the 1,400 units.
It is, because that money's already here.
So,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
thank you, guys.
Oh, you're my.
Thank you. Councilman Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming. I have some thoughts and random questions. Actually, in addition to getting the number of how many out of the 1,400 units preserved and newly developed, could you also get us like the exact AMI for those?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
We can, frankly, we'll refer you to a website that gives you all the information on every project for that.
Okay,
And I have an answer. So yeah, the answer on new production is the vast majority. It's 1,241 new units, 240 preserved, a total of 1,481. So 1,241 for the new.
that's good. Okay. So going back to the statewide housing plan, do we have like a deadline of some sort when that's going to be completed?
We don't yet, because the request for proposals that was actually designed by my predecessor, but I think this had some merit, is asking the applicant teams to tell us how long this will take. So I want to speak intelligently when I talk about how long. We do wish to have an interim work product in about a year, so that we have more to talk about as the legislative session comes to a close next year. But more to come on the timeline.
I'm just gonna kind of come down my list of scratch here. I'm a school social worker full-time, and so I've intimately have helped families across, typically Providence, Pawtucket, to find housing when they're on the brink of homelessness. So when it comes to the $30 million sort of proposal for homelessness infrastructure, will some of that go to, making our frontline workers whole in terms of wage increases for housing providers? I say that because when a person calls CES, they're on hold for a while. And when someone is in desperate for housing and they're on that brink of desperation, I've had families not stay on the line.
Yeah.
And I've had to convince them, please hang on, keep waiting. And yes, there is a call, you could press a number of the list of options they gave you, and folks are supposed to call you back. And I've had families that don't get that call back. And when I transitioned to my new role at a different school, they said, Ms. Royce, welcome. There's a family who's gonna be homeless within 48 hours. So I rushed to get this family housing, and I reached out to my network. It was a Hail Mary. I reached out to my folks on social media, but it wasn't a housing provider agency that secured funding for a family who to be sheltered in a hotel. This organization will remain anonymous because they've asked to be. But when I was running around trying to get this family shelter, there was various, and this is no fault of any housing provider, because everyone's at capacity. But no one picked up their phones. CES is bottlenecked, it's congested. And so when we think of someone who's in a desperate circumstance, we have to expand the amount of workers in our who's on the front line, who are fielding these calls. Because if they are not answering someone's call, that person in that dire circumstance is going to further lose hope in the system. So I just want to express that thought. I also want to ask, I know, Mr. Secretary, you have said that a lot of calls to the CES are from predominantly folks living in Providence. Do we have numbers for that?
Not predominantly, the largest subset.
The largest subset?
Over.
Got it, okay. And what is second to that?
What's that, I'm sorry?
What town is next, if you don't mind me asking?
I'll follow up if you want.
Okay,
But it's the largest by far.
large.
By far.
Okay, my next thought is I'm happy to hear that we are expanding shelter capacity, not just in Providence, but throughout our state. And this is again, no fault of you both by any means, but I get so frustrated that shelter capacity, we're still chasing down shelter capacity. Like there's so much in these spaces and conversations, you know, housing first, permanent housing. And yet we've neglected for decades that we're in our state scrambling still for shelter. It is just so frustrating. The other random question thought I had around shelter capacity and our ability to secure shelters throughout the state is we're moving folks to these shelters. And we know this like any population, it's transient, they got things to do, they got places to go. How are they going to their doctor appointments? Does your department agency have responsibility in making sure folks are going where they need to go? Because if their services are located in Providence, we brought an example of Burgerville. I've been to Burgerville probably 3 times in my life. Truthfully,
Yeah.
how are folks getting to their necessary doctor appointments and things like that?
You listed out a lot.
There's a lot there. I
No, a lot of the observations that are crucial and a lot of the challenges and potential solutions. So thank you for those counseling. Every single question and comment has been to that effect, by the way. Really, Madam Chair, very valuable dialogue here tonight. I'm going to go back to your CES points and let you know that there's an evaluation that's going on with the CES system. You probably know this, but the CES system is actually not operated by the state, but instead by the coalition. Right. And we're evaluating its efficacy through a contracted for approach and set of vendors with Rhode Island Housing. And Rhode Island Housing oversees the continuum of care, which in that sense oversees the coordinated entry system. So we're working on that, meaning a whole group of people are working on that, not just the housing department, and we'll have more where we can try to look at call frequency, wait time, the coordinated entry system policies as to the distribution of placements. One of the things that comes up with frequency, and you, Madam Councilwoman, raised this. Are folks coming in from out of town, and if so, why? In the prioritization system, we all ought to look at this anew. There's a very idealistic and I think a beautiful idea around ensuring that the degree of challenges expressed by clients entering the queue, the degree of challenge should be one of the main criteria to evaluate how quickly an individual or a family is placed. However, Is it working? What additional implications are there for residents of a given city or town and their ability rapidly to access the beds in their own community? So these are questions we need to get into in evaluating the CDS system. They're complicated questions. As with many aspects of housing policies, there's no perfect answer, but we can do a better job of having the dialogue, of examining it, and that's what you're doing, council. And I think that's great. On a quick look, I believe the next ranking city FYI for referrals to CDS is Woodside, FYI, and it's single-digit percentage versus over a third. You were making a variety of other key points. Anything else that you want to make sure I respond to?
Yeah, if there's, I'm sorry, just, okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So, funding for those cities and towns who host,
Yes.
who host folks who are unhoused. What's the number on that specifically?
It's 980,000 or so. It's under $1 million. That's proposed in the budget. And we'd like to prove that it's effective, and it's a one-time source of revenue, but we'd like to prove that it ought to be a structural part of the system, quite frankly.
Yeah, of course I supported it. Yeah, thank you. And the last question was the former Memorial Hospital. There's it's not clear as far as management structure and all of that. When will because I had a few families who were there temporarily, and I believe there was a flood of some sort, and those folks had to go elsewhere, and they only had the shirts on their back and they had lost everything. If that even makes sense, because they were already in a dire circumstance, but that flood really put them in a bind. Will you revisit that, and what is the deadline in your view as to when you would pursue potentially eminent domain to seize that? And seize is kind of like a strong word, but for the state to take over and begin to use that for the public good.
Yes, we are continuing to look at it. Timeline for utilizing eminent domain, quite frankly, hopefully never, because it resolves itself in some other way. And right here together, we are demonstrating how this tool, in my view, ought to be utilized, which is rarely if ever. But the mere threat of it under complex circumstances where there might be a public benefit under these very rare circumstances, the mere threat of it might propel action. Might result in a friendly transfer, might result in a change in management. That's what we're aiming to undertake. It's hard to assess exactly what's happening with that property right now. It's complicated. There are teams of attorneys looking at it.
So just to follow up, Secretary, so are we talking years in your view because we don't have years, and that's a great space to house folks.
Right.
No. In your mind, how long are we going to wait until the internal management resolves this?
Yeah.
Before the state?
Hopefully not years, but and by the way, we continue to demonstrate how we do need a toolbox with many tools in order to make things move rapidly. We need dollars. We need the ability, we need something like a proactive development entity that has the staff with the expertise to conduct real estate transactions, attorneys capable of interfacing with private sector, sophisticated attorneys who represent private sector developers. We need all these things, and sometimes, very rarely, we need the looming threat of eminent domain so that folks know we mean business, to be utilized only as a last resort, hopefully never. So we're demonstrating this here with this conversation. Having said that, we're aiming to move expeditiously, but we can't promise it because the court system will no doubt ultimately govern this. There's going to be litigation. Unless something very friendly happens, that's possible. So therefore, what are we doing? Looking for alternatives. Looking for alternatives that don't involve this mess And we are looking in a variety of places. And again, I know I made the point, it just bears remaking. We need your help. Providence locations and locations beyond. I mean, ours is a small state. You know of other locations, even beyond the bounds of our capital city. Where do you think we ought to be looking? That might be an ideal place for emergency solutions, shelters and centers for folks experiencing homelessness, and permanent solutions. Where might we build more housing in our state? Because we have these intersecting challenges, the lowest production rate in the country.
Thank you so much. Councilman, are you all set?
So thank you. Mr.
Thank you,
Okay.
Councilman.
Right now, I'm gonna move on to item number 2, and I'm gonna ask the clerk to please read it.
Public comment.
So I want to keep public comments very short, and if you have questions that are even better for the committee. We have not walked through water, so I appreciate both of you and Hannah just really hanging in there with us. This is how important it is for us to entertain conversation with you tonight, so I appreciate you being patient and taking our questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right now-
We welcome that.
Thank you so much. Right now, I'm gonna start with Ryan Crawford.
Madam Chair, can I just have whoever speaking come up to the table?
Yes, I will, dear, and identify themselves for the record. I will do just that. Ron, could you please come to the table and identify yourself for the record, please, sir?
Could you also just write your name, just so we have for the record?
Sure.
Secretary Pryor.
Let's see what.
See that. What's name?
First and last name and whatever you.
Great. Just two things. Thank you for being here. One is.
Please identify yourself
Oh,
for the record. Yeah, you
okay.
just say your name out loud.
Wrote it down.
Spell it. That's.
Ron Carlson, here, I'm resident of South Providence, for 56 years. And also a member of South Providence Neighborhood Association. So, one of the most important things I think is safety. And, you know, in the South Providence Neighborhood Association released an assessment just recently, which talked about safety, being provided at one location, that was concerning. But what I wanted to talk about is just very briefly, there were 5 recommendations that we feel, if you haven't received the assessment, we can send that to you. I would love to talk to you about it. The 5 recommendations that we feel can actually help the system as a whole. Because one of the things that when you look at the policies and procedures for the Rhode Island COC, there is an assumption that the places where individuals are being housed are safe. There are 7 key things that HUD requires reporting on. None of them talk about safety. However, in reading through, there's an assumption that safety is a major part of it. And so within that, there are some 5 recommendations. So we'll send that to you, so I don't bore you with that right now. But I think it's working closely with the COC and also Rhode Island Housing. There can be some adoptions of committees that can look specifically on safety. And when talking to individuals within the housing sector, we talk about safety, immediately it seems to be going to, you know, fire inspections, pass, things of that nature. But we're talking about decreasing physical assault, sexual assaults, being subject to being in a situation of drug sales, things of that nature, that individuals seeking shelter should not be coming to. So I'd love to share that with you and also speak with you about it a little bit more. And one last question for clarification. When you talk about a third of the calls that come in are from Providence, do we look at that in terms of individuals where they came in from? Or are we looking at the fact that they're actually making those calls physically from Providence, which is logical because there's so many individuals that are coming in from other parts of the state that are actually here. So if they're making those calls while they're here, does that get counted as such?
That's a question I've been asking myself of the team, and that's something we'll get into in this yes review to see what kind of deep dive we can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron, as always.
Thank you. Don't Victor.
I will, thank you. So my name is Doug Victor, and I am almost a 40-year resident of the south side of Providence. I want to commend this committee for your questions and your overview. And I want to thank you, Mrs. Pryor, for doing that. I've been saying for a long time that the South Providence neighborhood, the south side, the story about the impact of the overconcentration of homeless facilities and wraparound services needs to be told. Councilwoman Harris, you did a great job tonight telling that story. There's more to be unearthed there. So my question and concern has to do with a number of things. And first is the potential of concentrating more people who are at the poverty level in neighborhoods with high concentrations of poverty already. Is that a goal? Is that something that is on the table? The other piece is I received an email from an organization. I'm a neighborhood leader. I chair the Elmwood and South Providence Neighborhood Crime Watch. I produce a weekly newsletter that goes out to about 400 people. I received a newsletter this past month from an organization who wants to open a facility in the south side. As a neighborhood leader, I received this. As a volunteer, I received this. What is my capacity as a volunteer to manage what this means to receive this? So when I look at it, first meeting discovered that this was already a plan, that the lease was about to be signed. Where is an earlier vetting process with the communities that these are coming into? I need to appeal to you, Secretary, and appeal to our city council to help draft an ordinance that would make it necessary for before these services come into our neighborhoods, especially every neighborhood. But I am speaking from the living the impacts of having an overconcentration and what that has meant for so many years in the South Side, and maybe even how it's prevented some healthy economic development happening there and keeps the South Side down. So I think it's terrific that it's been mentioned that the system created the problem. This is a system that works off the profit model. People profit by developing and developing housing. Can we pull together a think tank of people who can critically come up with some non-traditional, historic, systemic solutions for homelessness? There are those happening. In the city of Honolulu, for instance, there is a homeless community that is self-governed. And it is a community. It is a people who need who need to be in community with other people. There are rules, and if people can't abide by those rules, they're not welcome there. Or they're told, you want to be part of this community, you can't do this because it's destructive to the community. So there are models out there. So I'm appealing for these processes that are looking at these things to really think about how this can be re-envisioned. If not in whole, in part. And I would ask also that in your presentation, you mentioned other stakeholder participants. Well, I'm not another stakeholder participant. I'm a resident. I'm a community leader. I would ask you to name in your reports and ask the council to think about including how residents and neighborhood leaders are included in this, because it's not just our city council people who are doing the work. We are also doing a big share of it. And we know the city council people don't get remunerated very much. Well, we get nothing. I'm not asking for anything. All I'm asking for is that communities are included and communities are respected. And I would have loved to have seen on your presentation tonight a map of where the homeless facilities are in the state and where the wraparound services are. So I suspect it would be like maybe a point coming out of Warwick into Cranston and Swell in Providence, and maybe a point going up to Pawtucket, and then something in Woonsocket, and maybe something a little in Westerly, and little bits and dots, and maybe with something in Newport, little bits and dots here. Where's the equity in that? Please produce a map that gives a listing of all the homeless facilities and all the wraparound services to help educate the community. And the map is such a visual thing that it really makes an impact. And it gives us a real point on which to continue these conversations. And I consider me sitting at this table to have the privilege of being in on this conversation. And it's a very important conversation for many, many people. As we know, no one deserves not to have shelter. No one deserves not to have shelter. And at the same time, no community deserves to have an unfair impact by this also. So thank you very much for your time. I didn't keep it very short.
Thank you so much. We'll call on Diana from there. Please join us at the table. Did I see both of your hands up at the same time? Yeah, you both speak on the behalf, I guess, of the organization that way. Thank you for yeah. After signing in, please repeat your name for the record.
My name is Diana Gray, and I've been here for 73 years, living in Providence. I was born and raised here, and I'm going to be 74 October the 7th. And I was going to say we should. I'm glad you are all trying to get together, but there should been a place in Providence, Rhode Island, open, because it seems so far for these people to get there if they have no income to get there. They like you got St. Joseph's Hospital is not doing nothing. You got it should be more warm-up centers, because this winter's coming. I mean, when this winter comes, this summer comes, there should be another place in line for them, because not everybody's going to be able to go to them vouchers and get them vouchers and stuff, you see, because, so you need another warm-up center. They are, or maybe a place for the summertime for them. But, St. Joseph's Hospital has been empty. They got spider webs, cobwebs in there. I went the wrong way and got locked in the front door. It has spider webs and stuff there. They're only using one floor in there, and that's for mental on the fourth floor. So all that other space, they could probably open up some kind of a shelter for it, you know? But what I was gonna say is that, and housing, there's no tenant association groups there. And managers don't have, well, whatever the person says that lives there, they object to it, then you can't have it. You can't do what you wanna do. So, and make it a little easier. Other people from the outside, like you guys, maybe you should go into there and have people, the tenants, come to one of yous in a room in the community room by yourself, so they can talk about what the managers are doing to the tenants. I lived in a building for 18 years. I'm gonna be evicted in 26. They're trying to. Because some of their rules need to be changed too. Like family members. Nobody wants to throw their only sister's child out if the sister died. Okay? You're not gonna throw your child out in the street. That is the hardest thing for you to do, is take your child and tell them you can't come here because the manager don't want you to have it. Okay? Like some people say they kill for their family, right? I got a lot of funerals and stuff. I'm going to because I have a lot of family. I'm a native. I don't know how you're gonna do it. Maybe you're gonna all work together and figure out something, but people need to stop eviction. You understand, like, especially in winter time. You shouldn't evict nobody until they get their other place. You need to stop taking Section 8 away from people, because people get evicted over stupid little things. If the manager don't like you, she's gonna evict you over something. She's giving you all these letters. I got letters that tall because I got a dog and I'm doing things, but
Diana, I'm gonna have to yell point of order because we are trying to either.
okay, well, I'll try to hurry up.
Yeah, please,
I'm gonna-
and because you also have a whole you that want to speak,
Okay,
yeah,
so
and there's others.
I'm gonna make this short, but oh God, now I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm gonna make it, but I hope that you can all work together. And like, if you could go once in a while, because they're not gonna have no regular tenant association in that building or wherever they are. And I hope we can get people places right away. Like, they can't wait a week, they can't wait 2 weeks. They need to get a place they can go to right away. You know, as soon as they get out. It takes a long time to wait for a building to be built.
Yes, it does.
So it'd be good if we just take one of these empty buildings and just put families in there quicker, because people are getting evicted every day. And there's more and more out there. If it's not for a mental problem, it's for a hospital problem. But they're getting evicted every day, so we need help right away. And that's all I got to say. I'm sorry.
Secretary Clark, if you don't mind, thank you so much. I just want to grab the floor real quick. Is there any outlet that community members or the public can probably send messages or some suggestions to you or your secretary, your assistant secretary, Hannah? Maybe
Absolutely, yeah. we've
like,
got
yeah, you have a
There are
website.
2 team members here,
Mhm.
Kat Perez and Joey Lindstrom.
Who's Caparez? Oh, stand up, please. Stand up so we can take our eye on you. How you doing? We sort of know you, but thank you. We want to identify the folks that he's identifying.
Julie Lindstrom, right next to Kathy.
And thank you for being here. Thank you. I didn't know you had such a good crowd with you. I had some interesting stuff earlier. Is there any way the community to have a lot of passion around things that they observe every day and their grassroots level to be able to connect with you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Yes, and Kat and Joey can give you contact information.
awesome. So, for the record, identify yourself and
Yes, my name is Terry Wright, and I am the housing organizer at DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality. Thank you for having me. Housing Secretary Pryor, thank you. I'm Mary Kay and Housing Task Force. A lot of what I would like to articulate is maybe has already been said. So the two things that are on my mind right now are properties causing blight that aren't being used in neighborhoods. We do a lot of outreach and door knocking to make sure that, tenants and homeowners, are aware of the free lawyers that are offered if they're going through foreclosure eviction. And I would like to see a campaign come from those blight properties just sitting there. I even came up with this phrase and everything: use it or lose it. Because there's a whole property development like structure on Dartmouth Street. That's not being used. But here we are in homeless crisis. That's overlapping. And I'm sure there are plenty others around the city. I do take pictures when I come across like buildings that are just sitting there in blight. Why? I'm sure they're an environmental hazard to the neighborhoods that it's sitting in blight and also that not in my backyard type of politics. I just want to say that it should hold no weight when we are in crisis. Homeless and unsheltered people live in crisis without housing, and I don't believe that the community should have any say when it comes to saving lives. Because that is supposed to be a temporary move to put a roof over someone who is suffering and doesn't have housing. I hear it all the time. Neighbors come out and it's like, not in my backyard. And the project goes away and people are dying, losing limbs, losing their minds, picking up new drug use. Like, when does it stop? We haven't pressed the button for a state of emergency here, but we've had the National Guard come over to help with that transition at the Armory. I wish something better could have come out of that, like making sure that everyone who used the Armory has a place to go, or having opened up another place where people actually go, because I know there are some folks who are still out there forced to live outdoors because there aren't enough vouchers or shelter space. It's almost like we're hustling backwards here. And it's just really, it's frustrating. Many of us, we go home every evening when buildings out there that are sitting empty, people are forced to live outdoors. So I just want to leave that with you. I'm sure we all know that, folks are forced to live outdoors, but it's a serious problem. And sometimes there's no coming back from it, and people are losing their lives. Emergency doctors and personnel, they're exhausted. They have their regular triage patients, and then you have patients who come in that are homeless. They don't know what to do with themselves. Some of them are cold or just on a brink of dying from heat exhaustion. So what do? You have the Providence police who, I want to use the word on overkill, but they're exhausted because of the influx of 911 calls from the conditions that people have been pushed into without any immediate solutions. There's no urgency
in this housing crisis. So I just really wanted to paint that picture. It's a reality. My son lives couch to couch right now. He's homeless. I do the best I can. And if I did a little more, I think I would be out there with him, one paycheck away from being homeless myself, because we're not even at a livable wage yet. So I think as a community, as a state, we can definitely be doing more for folks who need that type of help.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I don't want to cut anybody off, but, okay.
I'll be very quick, I promise.
We're calling Steve. Steve, you don't mind joining us at the table? Yeah, please. And as, you know, like the rest, you would state your name for the record, please.
I'll be fast. My name is Steve Walquist, and I'm with Uprise, Rhode Island, and I just had a few, as people spoke, I had just a few notes I was taking, and I thought you might like some context for stuff. When the armory closed, according to Eileen Hayes, she said, quote, "We were able to place about 30 folks at a motel, another 20 in other shelters. We have 10 more folks we have to bring to the motel today when we can find them because they lost track of them. And we gave out about 20 tents." Right, so those people were left the armory, went directly into, full outside homelessness. One of the reasons people come to Providence, and I think this is important to know, is because if you go to any shelter, there's a list, usually on the door or in the bathroom, it'll show all the places you can get free meals. Right, every day but Friday, somewhere in the state, there's a free meal. To get there, most of them are in Providence, and to get there, you take buses or public transportation, because many people who are homeless don't have cars. And so when we take people out of Providence and we move them to Barville, there's one bus that goes to Barville and back each day, right? One bus goes in, goes out. I think it leaves around 7, comes back around 7 or 8, and that's it. So if you miss that bus, you're in Barville, right? And there's no free meals in Barville that I know of because they don't have that infrastructure and support. Same for doctors, same for your job. I know people who are homeless in Woonsocket, for instance, they have full-time jobs, but they live in tents. And because they don't have, maybe you have addiction issues, maybe have other things, but they can't live in Providence. I know a person who lives at Harrington Hall. He works in Woonsocket. He takes the bus 2 hours there and 2 hours back every day to go to Woonsocket. Never misses his job. He's very highly regarded where he works, but this is his life, is 4 hours a day on a bus there and back. I've known people who have died homeless, frozen to death. I know people who, I know a man who told me that the best thing that ever happened to him was frostbite because he lost his fingers and toes. And as a result, he was put to the top of the CEF list and he found housing for the first time. So to him, losing his fingers and toes was the best thing that ever happened to him. He's very happily in housing now, supplied because of that. Another thing to remember is that when the armory opened, it drew people to Providence. So if we're talking about people coming here from other places, for instance, know that people used to be housed or living outside places like Woonsocket, and then they were evicted by the mayor there. And their house, their tents were literally plowed, their possessions tossed away. Same thing happened in Warwick, by the way. The mayor of Warwick says there were nobody living there, but don't forget, you can walk into my house right now and there's nobody home. And you can say, nobody's living here, let's plow it over, let's throw all the shit away, right? Stuff away, sorry. This could be problematic to have a mayor or police officers or people who don't serve those people say that this is an empty encampment when it's not really empty at all. Encampments are last resort for people. The reason they form encampments is because they need the safety that comes from having groups of people around them. They can look out for each other. If they're substance users, they don't necessarily die alone. There's somebody to look out for them, maybe have Narcan ready. If you're alone in a tent somewhere in the middle of the woods, you just die, you just gone. And I've known people who have died that way as well. South Providence does become a dumping ground for, as we know, environmentally gross industries. We don't want anywhere else in the state. They put it there because poor people tend to live there and because they can't fight back. They don't have the organizational skills, they don't have the power, they don't have the clout in places like this or the state house or politically to say, hey, we don't want it here. And it's also why we put places, like crossroads and stuff there. Not only does it, so it's a snowballing effect, right? It keeps growing and growing. And I also want to point out that it isn't NIMBYism necessarily to say, hey, what's going on in South Providence? It's NIMBYism in all the other places like the east side, who have got the political thought to prevent that from even coming up. They don't even talk about that. No one's saying, I mean, I've never seen a tent at Lippert Park on the east side near where I live last more than a day. Because they are immediately evicted by the police. But if a tent shows up in a park somewhere in South Province, it's gonna stay there for a while. And there's a reason for that. It's the same thing if you think back even a little while ago when marijuana trucks, white kids smoking pot were basically picked up, driven home and told, you know, and then black kids were just taken to the, they're just thrown right into the system. We know this is the way it happens because this is the way it happens in this. And the last thing I'll say is that, as we're making some of these deals to get housing, yes, you guys in this, we should watch out because some of the people that we're signing deals with are notorious slumlords. You know, the person, I think, I forget which group it is, maybe it's Open Doors, maybe it's another one. They're signing with a guy named Zuby, and he is just like one of the worst slumlords in Providence. He has a terrible history. I don't know if anybody's covered him or but I've written about him, and his stuff is terrible, and he just stands to make so much money from this. And we really should think about how we're going to do that ethically as well, because I don't know. He would be somebody I would not mind seeing just take his property and do something better with it. He's not doing a good job. And that's all I have to say, and I apologize for it too long.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to cut anybody off, but it is getting late, and again, I'm so sorry, we never offered you order, never. So that's not fair, but we appreciate everything that you have been able to bring to us. We appreciate even the ideas that you have been able to, you know, also exercise with us, and we also want to make very clear that we're just not here just to say that we're here. We're here to really work like yourself, like both of you are, you know, really move this needle forward.
Feel that.
Totally understand that for years and years and years and years, this has not been a priority.
Yes.
We are in an opportunity right now, and especially with the energy you can see in this room, the suggestions and people who are able to feed into it. So by all means, you're not alone. However, we really want to see some things come out of this. We don't want this to be your last visit, and I promise you're gonna have water and if you haven't eaten supper, I promise you that too. But you have to come back and stay engaged with us because we are trying to get through this. This became an emergency for us because of one of the people said the shelter closed. I mean, the women's center closed. So it became a priority to talk from this level with the continual care and with the coordinated interest system and Rhode Island Bill of Rights. We've been able to just try to understand that for us, we're in discovery. And it's no, we don't have any change or idea that we don't know exactly how this is going to end up, but we hope to have the best impact there is without money. Without over concentrating neighborhoods. With state itself concentrating on transportation, we heard that twice or three times, I heard it over and over. For people who are traveling beyond the Destiny point of Providence, right? You said something that was very, that we already know. When you build, even if it's only 34 units, people come, we'll get 34 units, it goes in the paper, we have over 90 people in one day ship themselves to Providence for, Steve said it so well, for whatever reason that they don't feel like service or anywhere else. And the councilwoman has said, it's a lot and it's overburdened. So we're looking forward with working with you, of the 10%, affordable housing, being able to be spread throughout Rhode Island period. And we are glad that the governor is a part of this, and I know you guys spend time with the governor trying to make sure that he understands how important it is from your outreach coming out, visiting with folks like ourselves, and then reporting back to him. So anything, you know, we can do, we're here, we have some great policy people. Before I end this tonight, I would like to ask Christine Brown, who has been the leader for us here, to try to help us understand this stuff, because at the end, we're just trying to figure out exactly what is some things that we can move, some policies that we can move that will not cause harm. Christine, I would like for you to please come to the table. Is there anything you want to end with? Or is there another meeting that I should be talking about that I haven't said anything about before we end? And again, thank you so much. I've learned so much in one night. I really did. I didn't believe.
Thank you.
You, Madam Chair. Before you leave, I do want to say that when the governor's amendment comes up at the State House, please let us know how we could be helpful in supporting, whether in testimony or written or verbal. Sorry. And we are looking for other recommendations at the local level for policies from all the presenters. So if you have suggestions for that, we welcome them. They can come to myself or Sally, who is also on our policy team. The task force has 2 more presentations coming. And then in July, I will be giving a presentation accumulating policy suggestion from all the presenters thus far. Because you've heard that council leadership wants to have action steps. And we mean that, and we want to move forward, most likely after August recess. So sometime in the fall with some policy priorities. Our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, and we will be hearing from the Rhode Island Center for Justice. They will be giving us information on current status of evictions and eviction processes in the city.
Thank you so much. If there's no further business before this humble body, I would like to entertain a motion to move to adjourn. I see Councilwoman Gray said she's making that motion, second by Councilman Espinal and Councilman Royce. Again, we want all in favor?
Aye.
We want to appreciate the public for coming tonight and bearing with us in this conversation. And most of all, thank you for all that you've been able to bring to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.